Hi, I'm Colin Roth, the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, joined by Will Flanders, our research director, discussing a new study out this morning on Act 10 and student outcomes, graduation rates, and standardized test scores. Act 10, of course, was the signature collective bargaining reforms passed in 2011. We all remember the hoopla, the craziness in the state that resulted in big protests, recall elections. But Act 10 is really was a revolution for local governments. It really changed how things are done in the state, resulted in huge savings, $5 billion, and is still the subject of really hardened partisan debate. There's been some academic studies, some done here, some by others, to really kind of figure out what the effects of Act 10, how to judge this outside of kind of the partisan, rhetoric that goes around the law. We know supporters point to the changes to local government, freeing them up, the big savings. Detractors often will point to anecdotes. They say, hey, look at this school district here that's struggling. Look at the referendums around the state. But this new study, which is peer-reviewed, that just came out this morning, looks at Act 10 and tries to isolate its effect on student outcomes, graduation rates, and standardized test scores. Will Flanders is here to break it all down. Let's start with the methodology.
Sure.
Tell us how we set about to find out the effect of Act 10 on student outcomes.
Sure. So our goal was to do the most comprehensive study that's been done to date relating these two concepts. There's a couple things out there, but the way to start that process was to send open records requests to all 422 school districts throughout the state of Wisconsin. We received responses in the end after numerous follow-ups from about 90% of districts. And what we did then was we looked through these teacher contracts that we received to look for the specific time frame when some of the key provisions of Act 10 were implemented. Then we compared that to test score data that's available from DPI to sort of compare Act 10 implementation with academic outcomes in terms of proficiency on state standardized tests, as well as graduation rates.
Okay, so you were able to isolate the effect of Act 10 at the district level, right? We're not looking at the state level, we're looking at the district level. And we were able to see exactly what year Act 10 was implemented with each district. And then we were able to kind of use various control variables to isolate the effect of Act 10 on standardized test scores and graduation rates. Sure. That's correct?
That's right.
So what did we find? What is what is the big reveal here?
So what we found is that in terms of proficiency on standardized tests in mathematics, we saw a positive effect. So after districts implemented Act 10, math proficiency rates increased on average throughout the state. In terms of graduation rates, which we also looked at, we saw that there was no effect on graduation rates. So some might take that to be a negative finding. I think in a state with already pretty high graduation rates, we can take that as sort of a neutral outcome or maybe even a positive given some of the financial savings that we've seen.
So math proficiency rates increased due to Act 10. That's what we were able to find. Graduation rates, already some of the highest in the country, were unaffected. What about reading and English language arts? I noticed you didn't mention that.
Sure. So one of the things that was changed between the WKCE and the forward exam is that on the WKCE, there were separate sections for English and language arts, whereas on the forward exam, those are combined. So really it doesn't make for a direct comparison. That's the reason we didn't directly or at least include those in the main text of the paper. And additionally, there was a lot more variation between English language arts scores between the tests than there was in math. So a couple reasons we decided not to include those in the main text.
Okay, so maybe at a future day we could include those and have a better understanding of the effect of Act 10 on English language arts as well as math. But for this analysis, we found no effect on graduation rates, already high graduation rates, and a positive effect on math. So how do we interpret these results?
So I think as you mentioned in the intro, there's a lot of rhetoric out there from folks that say that Act 10 has had this negative effect on students. We conducted a poll ourselves earlier this year where a large number of people seem to think there's been a negative effect on students. I think this is the best evidence to date that not only we've seen the financial savings, the $5 billion that you mentioned, or probably more at this point, but actually there's not really any evidence that there's been this negative effect on student outcomes, and there may even be some reason to think there's a positive effect.
So, so a skeptic might read this paper and say, okay, I accept that there were, big savings for Act 10. I accept that there were some changes at local government, but how would it possibly impact students in a positive way? I thought this was just kind of a budget savings thing.
Sure. So that's a good question, and I think while we can't directly answer that with this paper, there is some good speculation that's well reasoned that we can offer. One of the things that Act 10 did was allow districts to better tailor the education received in their school to the student needs in that school. So, for instance, now schools can reward effective teachers with merit pay. They can also seek out if there's a particular need in a school for a teacher in a subject that's not being taught effectively or not offered. You can actually more easily seek out teachers from other districts and other states even to fill that need. And by the way, it's also easier for districts to remove ineffective teachers from the classroom than it was prior to Act 10.
Well, thank you, Will Flanders, Research Director at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. I'm Colin Roth. Please check out this new report on Act 10 and student outcomes at will-law.org. We'll catch you next time. Thank you.